The only thing we learn in history is that we learn nothing from history. That is a statement that was made by a German philosopher of the name George Wilhelm. Now, that particular statement resonates with the ongoings currently in Uganda in regards to human rights violations, to torture, abductions, among other violations that we're experiencing. And today we are discussing, of course, a topic that is of pertinent importance, but also one that resonates with the status quo, which is in relation to the abductions, torture, and impunity of the Chief of Defense Forces, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba. And the question that we ask is, what way for our young country, Uganda? Joining me to discuss this very interesting topic is a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will help us put perspective to the topic. But no particular order, I'll introduce my guests, but also give them the leeway to say hello, and then we can start the conversation. From my immediate right, I am joined by the one and only Kwesiga Emmanuel, has been on the show for a couple of times and is right now a veteran also on the show. Very happy to have you here.
It is a pleasure.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited and looking forward to having important deliberations together with the brilliant minds.
Thank you. Looking forward to having that interesting conversation with you. Right next to Kwesiga, we're joined by the only lady on the show, Ms. Olai. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm very humbled to be here and be able to share my mind with everyone out there.
Thank you. Looking forward to having an interesting conversation with you. Right next to Olai, we are joined by Guild President Emeritus of Cavendish University, one and only Aruho Brian. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. I do extend my appreciation to Civic Space TV for the continuous invitations.
Thank you, and looking forward definitely to having an interesting conversation as always. Last but not least, we are joined by a gentleman from Kyambogo University by the names of Mr. Thomas. Most welcome.
Thank you, Drake. It's always nice to be here and contribute to the pool of knowledge. And once again, I'm happy to be here and deliberate.
All right. Thank you. Emmanuel, allow me to start with you. I know at the beginning of the show, you looked at me and like, Drake, but
You're such a traitor.
I'm not a traitor, but we must definitely lay pace to the conversation. Yes. And as a pace setter, I know you'd help do that quite eloquently. As I said, the only lesson we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. And the going-ons right now in this country is one that is relating to abductions, to torture, to impunity. We are not following the law. The CDF goes ahead and, of course, on a Saturday morning, posts the photo of Mr. Alias Eddie Mutwe, the head of security of Mr. Robert Sentamu, aka Bobby Wine. And that image alone was traumatic. And the caption was, he is learning Runyankore, among other things that we're going to discuss. But from the statement I started reading the show, that what we learn from history is nothing. And we know in the preamble of our constitution, it emasculates that we had a tumultuous history. And from what is happening now, it's like we're moving back to history. Take us on from there in the historical context.
Thank you so much, Drake, for the opportunity, and most importantly for selecting such a topic that is rather pertinent in the present circumstances, and more so in the political sphere, as we head to the general election that is next year in 2026. Just like you clearly stated it, I wonder what basis your analysis comes in, but it is true that what we learn from history is literally nothing. I guess that you get that from a point of we've seen similar things happen elsewhere. And at that very moment, the implication, or the presumption then, would be that we've seen the consequences of such things happening in the long run, the long-term effect, and that in this day and era, countries should have shifted from the way they run things, and leaders should have mastered the art of leadership, understanding that times change and so many things change, and even human beings, even leadership does change. But look, what happened in 1789, in fact before 1789 in France, the torture, the dehumanization and everything still replicates itself in the rest of the countries, including Uganda, and just today, which informs our discussion. And for me, that's quite absurd. You talk of a point a tweet by the CDF. That has happened. Most of us have had different views regarding the CDF's tweets. Some people have taken it so lightly. Those that enjoy humor have found a source of entertainment, and that's okay. But there are also those that have a feel and actual analysis of every statement that he does make and every tweet he tweets. But I have this to say, that not everybody is anybody. I don't know if that makes sense. That you and I could make a statement, same statement, but its implication could be different, dependent on our different capacities and who we are in affairs of the country. The statements the CDF makes, if those were made by an average Ugandan, an ordinary person like me, they would have no implication. But these are statements coming from a person who holds a top office, who is in the power structures of the country. And so such a person is not anybody. And so whatever they say has a bearing, it has an effect. And I understand that if that had not been the case, we wouldn't be here particularly to discuss those tweets. But lastly, on the same bit, is that these statements he makes have a potential of turning into a social dynamite. I guess we know what that is. They have potential to cause upheaval in this country. Because one, I am selective in my choice of words. They seem divisive. That is very true. They sound and seem sectarian, and so that is why they have potential to cause political unrest, and they are a probable and potential social dynamite. And conclusively on that very bit is that for me, in my personal capacity, I am not okay. I am not one of those that find that to be entertaining, but rather very absurd for our country. Basically, for the start, that's what I can say.
All right. Mr. President, Brian, from the context that we gather from my brother Emmanuel is a very succinct overview of what we see leading up to the events that we all saw. But let us just, from his analysis, just take us back in history, because we have seen scenarios whereby Ugandans have been tortured, Ugandans have been abducted, Ugandans have been killed, and up to date some people have never been found. And that even informs us 30 years down the road after the promulgation of the 1995 Constitution, which somewhat had gained human rights progress and traction, seems now to be moving 30 years of progress backwards in what we see. But even before the 1995 Constitution, we have seen governments commit the same acts and atrocities, and at the end of the day, seeing the reaction from the citizenry, a past that we wouldn't want to affiliate ourselves with, but it somewhat seems impossible to avoid. But let's just understand that past is what I'm interested in, and I believe our viewers would also like to understand before we come towards the 1995 Constitution to date.
Thank you so much. I want to appreciate Emmanuel for taking us back to the French Revolution. You need to know, he said that we seem to learn nothing from history. And I blame that not on the normal citizenry. I blame that on people that have offices that influence. You see, you don't know the extent to which your office influences something until you make either a wrong statement or a wrong action. The French kingdom, generally, I think it wasn't that bad. It's not until Queen Marie Antoinette came out and said, if you can't afford bread, then buy cakes. And later on, when she was put in for the head to be taken off, I mean, people had already expressed dissatisfaction, yes? And the whole political turmoil, people saying, no, I think we are done with this whole system. It was because of a statement that looked small, but it had a much bigger impact. Still, when you come away from that, people may say that that's too far-fetched. You come back to Africa. I think in 2011 is when Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was assassinated. And he had made this sort of system. They had started calling themselves the Gaddafi clan. The Gaddafi clan had Colonel Muammar Gaddafi as the head. It had his children, his sons, top military and intelligence chiefs, and they're related, and how they used to give birth. So you name your kid Gaddafi. It was the whole Gaddafi clan. Unfortunately for him is that on the day he was assassinated, him and his son were actually killed because it was the same convoy. His son had been the head of intelligence for quite some time, but was killed. Now that just brings you to, he had been a playboy and all these things. You may think people do not notice until things actually go wrong. One of his children who was prime minister, luckily for him, he wasn't picked up, but up to date, he's still in prison. He has, I mean, the government, the sides that took over, quickly made it very clear that we have this guy and we don't have intentions of releasing him. He's there in those mountain areas, wherever he has been put. Up to now, he has never been brought out. You go to Saddam Hussein. I think Saddam Hussein was assassinated around 2006 or so. I can't recall the years very well. But Saddam Hussein, one of the most powerful figures, had to hide in sort of a well, not to be picked, after forces had been deployed. This was among the a very stronghold. But being picked up like a shithole, I think that was very dehumanizing. You see his children also being assassinated. We are not predicting the same here, but we are just saying, when you hold a certain office, at least have common sense added to that knowledge and education you get in school. When you go down to Rwanda, the genocide took only but a little spark, and everything blew out. When you see them commemorating that day every single year, they recall where they had been. The pain comes in, it's a fresh pain that comes in, and they get to understand, oh, actually, guys, I don't think we need to do A, B, C, and D because we've been down that path, and we don't want to go down that path. Uganda is not very different. If you're to recall the time of the Pigeonhole Constitution, a lot happened. A tribe nearly went extinct here. Just because one person, the person who was holding the highest office, thought that, maybe I can play MPs and bring in a Pigeonhole Constitution, but a tribe nearly went. Look at the time of Field Marshal Idi Amin Dada when he was president. When the 8 years sort of got done, we nearly lost an entire tribe, just because of how the military had been structured, the military and intelligence had been structured. People looked at them and said, these guys are actually the guys that are causing us pain. Now you come down to the UPDF currently. When you hear of Special Forces Command and the prominent faces that come out in intelligence military, people tend to say, oh, it's now again another block. Now, when the person who is heading all the forces comes out and says, we've picked the lead of opposition, we've picked an opposition security head, because the lead of opposition, yes, is the Right Honorable Joel Senyonyi, but the person heading that political party is His Excellency Robert Chagulanyi Sentamu, and he has his head of security. That's not a small position, we need to understand. So when you come out and pick that head of security, first of all, it means all the other guys inside are easy targets, because then how did you pick the person? That means either you have people within the party who are giving you information, or you've just done it deliberately to show them that we have the power. Yeah. So when you pick such a person and then you go on, picking is fine. President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni on a number of occasions has come out and said, no, we do not have this person, even when Ugandans know, Bamulina. But he will never openly say it. But you come, people already speculating, oh, this guy might be the one with him, and then you come out and say, we actually have this person in our custody.
The basement.
And he's running Runyankore. One, by you saying we have the person, already the little trust that people are trying to sugarcoat, maybe he doesn't have it, you've put it away. Because now people know it's General Moses Kainerugaba, the CDF who has Eddie Mutwe.
All right, Brian, just hold on to that thought. Of course, from the arguments that you raise, you bring up a very good historical context from what we see in France in the 1980s, and then you bring us down to Libya, what we saw with Gaddafi and his family. Then you also bring us down to Uganda. But interestingly, that social dynamite that he mentioned about, it's something that we're going to articulate further in the discussion. But let me just bring in Thomas, and then have Alan. Thomas, the argument that I want us to look at the moment is the psychological effect that this particular tweet has had on Ugandans. Because when you sit down and you look at the words that were said, the photo that was posted, that raised a lot of emotions among Ugandans. A friend of mine called me and she was like, Drake, this is the first time in my life I'm scared in my own country. And I think that is something I would like you to handle. The psychological effect this particular tweet that we have seen this time, it has had on Ugandans.
Yeah, well, for one, I'm not surprised. I'm completely not surprised. I feel like I have had warnings. I've seen some, you would call them allegations, but I think on his side now, he has like, him putting out that picture has just proven like the doubts. But for some, like one, I already knew it in me that he's the one doing these things.
But Thomas, those are just allegations, because before the photo, they're just purely allegations.
No, but you still have to look at, you remember the Prime Minister when she came and she said they have them. But first, I would like actually to thank the current opposition, the majority party. It seems like their method is getting to people. The Kulabisa Method, I think it is spreading like wildfire. Some may not look at it as an important thing, but it is actually pushing, it is making information more available. My problem I have is that it's only in a certain part of the country. But if we could move, if we had, because you know there are not very many people that can access even this show. Not everyone can access the show, but how do we reach out to those people to show them, to give them what is actually happening, what is on ground? Because they may be that side and they don't know what is transpiring. Because earlier, before we were talking about, you talked about the show, the Kasuku show, and then for me, I feel like he's talking to the Baganda because the show is in Uganda. What about if we moved to Karamoja and we had the show in their language they understand? Because not everyone is given the opportunity to learn English.
Yeah.
So can we sensitize people? Yet, because when I was on this show a while ago, I talked about a class of those that have attained education, but they're still illiterate. They behave as if they don't know what is going on. They try to make everything simple, you know. I saw Honorable, the Minister for the Youth, Balam, talking, the way he responded on that. It's like they're taking us for a joke. I don't want to live.
So what psychological effect really now does this have on Ugandans? Because we saw the lovey-dovey messages that Honorable Balam always gives the CDF in terms of,
bootlicking.
Of course, that's the right word to put it, bootlicking. But besides that, we know right now that many Ugandans, inclusive of myself, I am frustrated. The pictures that I saw, I am traumatized. The tweets, the message, those tweets put out is extremely traumatic. For a young Ugandan who is growing in such a democracy, cannot recover from such.
Then the question is, what are you going to do about it?
That's exactly why I asked. And I think the psychological effect will definitely tell us what we're going to do about it.
Ugandans are afraid of, because once we take up such a topic and of politics, we need to understand what it means to be a politician. Once you're a politician, you're ready to take up the ultimate sacrifice.
Okay, just hold there. Shall get to that. Let me come to the legal aspect. We have the Constitution, Alan, and the Constitution in its entirety, under Chapter 4 of the Constitution, we have non-derogable rights. Inclusive of those non-derogable rights, torture stands amongst them. That you cannot go ahead and torture Uganda. Like you can, not only in our Constitution, but also international treaties do provide for that. And here is the Chief of Defense Forces posting a photo. Just allow me read some of the things
quoted verbatim.
he said. Yes, allow me read verbatim. he said that the beards were the first thing the boys removed after he finished crying and urinating. If you see Eddie's head now, he looks like an egg, totally clean. Allow me go further. He says Eddie started crying as soon as the boys grabbed him. Yeah? His runyankole is improving these days. This picture alone, for those who read, if you are reading Betrayal in the City, yeah? If you're reading Betrayal in the City, Uganda at the moment, we are like, what was that state? Kafura. You saw how, like, the tweets
depict,
like, his literature, his description. I would actually give the CDF kudos for writing like, but
you're saying he had a literature review.
No, maybe
No,
he was
but-
not supposed to be CDF. Maybe in another world, he would have been a very good writer, a perfect comedian. He has a
Just
lot of humor.
look at those words.
That
Very-
much.
Just let me read this statement again. Like, he says, if you see Eddie's head now, he looks like an egg. Full stop. Totally clean. Full stop. Another tweet. Eddie started crying as soon as the boys grabbed him. ...
His literature is actually good.
His runyankole is improving these days. Full, like, powerful, entirely descriptive. To the mind of an ordinary Ugandan who thinks there is still hope for the future, you're utterly blown off your seat. It makes you lose hope entirely. And my point here is, I'm just showing you the description, the power this message possesses. It says, not everybody is anybody. And this is just entirely not anybody else. He's the CDF. And we have the Constitution, the ultimate law of this country that provides that torture is a non-derogable right. And yet, this is a right that he willingly takes away from a Ugandan. A right that you don't play or touch. We saw days later, the Uganda Human Rights Commission wrote for the gentleman to be released unequivocally. They did not respond to that. We saw the Prime Minister of Uganda making also a very strong statement. We also saw the Minister of Justice making a statement. Fortunately, he was arraigned in Masaka Court. But you could see the man, Eddie Mutwe himself, he looks dehumanized, he looks weak, and the courts of law could possibly pass the same things we hear. The argument will be that, of course, he was in possession of military arms, which we know every Ugandan doesn't have, as a civilian, but that would be the argument. But my interest in bringing all these stories is to zero down to one thing. You're a law student, and you aspire to practice law in this country, but we're seemingly be entering in a lawless country whereby human rights, which is supposed to be highly respected, is not respected by people supposed to uphold it. Take us through the legalese of human rights, but also talk about the impact this has on the students who are studying law in this country and hope to uphold the Constitution and would at some stage not be in position to do so.
Thank you so much, Drake, for that elaborate question. I would like to bring it to your attention that, let alone like he spoke of Chapter 4, this is a non-derogable right. This is a right that every Ugandan, by the mere fact you're Ugandan, you are entitled to. You do not lose. And that aside, there's even a whole statute of the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Act. Yeah. So now, if you're having a whole CDF, like he said, there is somebody there are people who are not just anybody, and he is one of them. So any kind of statement he puts out there could hold a big impact on the state, right? Now, if you look at how he expresses himself, we are looking at Elias Eddie Mutwe being presented in a very sad manner, clearly a true evidence of what? Of torture. And this is the CDF coming out clearly and speaking of how he's now learning Runyankore, which is, we don't understand the importance of whatever he has done being linked to him learning Runyankore. Now that is all portraying that as a country, we are continuing to condone certain traits. We're continuing to respect, we are continuing to tolerate a certain trait that could have a big impact on us as a country. Now, several of us have come up and spoken of history. We have seen in history, like you started your speech and told us that a lot of us do not learn from the past, yeah, from our history. Now, we have seen the French Revolution. We have seen how it all had an impact. If anyone has studied history, you will realize that all, by the time they reacted, it was all a compilation of different things. I've had several people come out and say that several Ugandans are very relaxed, they're very quiet and all. Maybe if you know, that's how the whole French Revolution started out as a journey. They all started in a very slow and silent tone. It's such careless moves by different personalities, very important people who are not just anybody in the nation. They're such kind of character that eventually spark very deadly, disastrous impacts on the nation. Now, earlier on he spoke of Marie Antoinette, right? It was through Marie Antoinette's statement, which was just as minor, very humorous, if anyone took it humorous, like the way Ugandans are taking it. I've seen several tweets coming up and saying someone needs to differentiate between Kwesiga and Banyankore, right? Are you seeing the sort of social aspect that it's putting in place? We have seen several people in history how several tribes have been destroyed, several people have been killed, like he said earlier during Idi Amin's time. Yeah, a whole tribe was almost cleared. Yeah, so if we continue to condone certain traits from people who are not just anybody, at the end of the day, we are going to spark these Ugandans from silence, yeah? Now, we need to react as a country. The justice needs to speak up, not just by quoting sweet words, making us feel excited. We have all seen that come through us in this country, right? You've seen people sugarcoat issues and make it seem like they're going to solve our problem, but never. But the more we condone these certain traits, the more we let people who are not just anybody continue to behave in such kind of manner. That's what, in such kind of manner, at the end of the day, we are going to lose our constitution. And once the constitution is lost, yeah?
It is already lost.
Yes, thank you.
And that's the question that I want you to handle. Because you're studying the law, possibly highly passionate about human rights, pumped to fight for the freedoms of Ugandans and of this country. And yet, you see this happen.
If it's still going to fall back to an aspect of, yes, the human rights are being violated, but we continue to condone these actions, right? Now, we are seeing people being tortured. Now, this is creating a lot of fear, and at the end of the day, we're going to have several different personalities in the community camouflage under the same umbrella. And all this, we are going to keep having people being carried away and all that kind of aspect. We're going to continue having people, the several army men having looked at their own leader, yeah? Taking on these kinds of actions. Several people are going to take it on and continue behaving that kind of manner. At the end of the day, we shall lose our state. The particular people who should be protecting us at this particular point are going to lose that sense of aspect from which they come from, and that we shall all have it lost, and we shall lose our country as a nation. We shall lose Uganda. We shall lose the aspect, the humanity. And as a passionate law student, as a passionate future law implementer, I'm going to grow a lot of fear. Why? Because if such high-end personalities, such as Elias Edimutwe, this gentleman is just not a nobody here. If they can pick him up, a whole lead of security of the opposition party, and we have seen this go on in the country, several people from the opposition government being taken up, being taken away from the different places, yeah? I guess you all understand what I'm saying. Yeah, so if you continue having this, is going to create a lot of fear. We're not going to have a freely expressive kind of environment. Several young people are going to be suppressed not to speak out because, well, your family is scared of you being taken away in a drone. Because clearly they are now speaking about it confidently. Because you saw during the tweet of Bobby Wine, where he comes up, His Excellency Bobby Wine, where he comes up and says he was taken in a drone. So these things we only imagined, these things we only looked at, we had as allegations, yeah, are now being portrayed by the top personalities. I will emphasize, like you said, not everyone is anybody, yeah? So if you continue having that, the people are not anybody, continue behaving in such a manner, we are going to lose it, and the constitution is going to be lost, and the law we seek to protect will be nowhere to, like, there will be no reason why, because we are condoning people who should be protecting this. We should hold them accountable. Yeah, we need more accountability from the security forces, because if this continues, if they continue violating the law and they keep sending out sweet messages, then we are going to lose a lot as a state.
Unfortunately. Maybe
it's adding.
Yeah.
You talked about the constitution being totally lost. You need to understand that the basic reasons as to why countries and not kingdoms have constitutions is it's the basic day-to-day protection of people. Yeah. Luckily enough for our country, Uganda, we are party to the ICCPR, we are party to the UDHR. And these are very strong, internationally recognized instruments, human rights instruments. Because you see, the ICCPR covers for all rights regarding civil and political. The UDHR covers for basically human rights. Yes, but then again, we are party to the instruments that fall under the African Union. Yeah. And we don't stop there. We have a very beautiful constitution. I must say, at the inception of the black and white, the preamble, it is very, it is just chronologic to how things flow. We, again, luckily enough, we do at least have some cases in the East African Court of Justice. I mean, Mabirizi took them before. Now, when you, I mean, she talked about it. When you come out and play these things, one, you sort of make people globally think that Uganda has no legal sector. Yeah? Because if, I mean, and we debated this earlier on with him, I think, if Eddie Mutwe was picked in location X, it's just reasonable enough that you bring the person to place X to be tried. The whole aspect of jurisdiction from the very basic is killed. You don't pick a person from X and then present them to A.
You are picked from Mukono and is presented in
it's
Masaka.
being presented in Masaka. So then that puts us to the question that maybe the magistrate.
For you, the students of law, of course, you talk about the civil procedure question.
Yes,
jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction is very key, because then how is the magistrate going to listen to the case? Because you don't begin with manslaughter, then you go to murder. You know, you begin with the capital offense, then you go down, breaking it. So you begin from murder, then you go to manslaughter. But you cannot present that without handling the basic civil procedure, the basic civil proceeding of jurisdiction. Because with jurisdiction, you go to admissibility.
Same. State in law.
Yes. So basically, you're saying we have no lawyers. You have
like
total disregard.
That case alone, it will be struck out on preliminary objection. Like,
I mean, yes. But then it can't be struck out on PO, because again, their lawyers were denied access to the court.
Anyway, let me just come to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, the social dynamite that you mentioned, that's something that I think at this point we are brewed for that debate. And I know, I know Brian, you're also interested in this debate. We have seen what history has taught us, but as well, we have not learned a lot from history. She made a very, very important analysis that you show us, you put a photo of Elias Eddie Mutwe and say he is learning Runyankole. Then there's a paragraph that he writes, his Runyankole is improving these days. And someone is wondering, where is this coming from? Yeah, where is this coming from? Why is Runyankole a subject of this photo? And then from nowhere, you saw what was happening on Twitter. People started attacking others who are very innocent. You know, some people make arguments that we have, that this government and everything, like, there's an assumption that every person from the West is a Munyankole and they're doing good. So all of you have a piece of the national cake. That is the assumption. And that alone from that tweet alone created a lot of hate in people's hearts. And that hate is still growing. With the increasing levels in poverty, if you have a particular sector of people who seemingly look okay, definitely people were just hanging on a thread. So, Emmanuel, the social dynamite that you're talking about, I know, rides on the stem of tribalism, which I want you to articulate.
Thank you, Drake. Matters concerning Uganda today are very complicated and hurting, for that matter. But people today have a phrase in Luganda that mu Uganda oseka wokaaba. You have reasons to laugh
and cry.
And to cry. Because honestly speaking, with the kind of tweets we've been reading, you definitely have to laugh. But at the end of the day, what's the implication? And the implication is that makes us cry. Also, the Waganda have a proverb that maybe MBB Sekiro. Even that
you're linguistic.
Very
You're from Zemabul.
I'm a son of that maybe MBB Sekiro, that even
The
in
bad.
danger, sometimes you laugh, not because it's funny or interesting, but it just happens that you find yourself laughing. So pondering upon that happens in Uganda today, sometimes you just laugh. Not that you're happy about anything. But in addition to that, there is a phrase of a bird that jumped from the ground to a high hill and it forgot that it was still on the ground, not knowing that the hill is still on the ground, and so literally that bird is still on the ground. Now, it is also true that you do not blame a fish or fish for not jumping. Neither can you ever blame a bird for not swimming. Because each of those animals has a specific kind of movement it has to go by, or action that it has to take. The implication here is that we blame people for what they should do and they are not doing. I hope this makes sense. Zeroing it down to the effects and the implication, the ramifications of the tweets of the CDF. Uganda has, I think from the latest statistics, we have 60 plus tribes.
67.
And we are
According
in
to the
a bid. The bid or the campaign has been to harmonize. How do we harmonize and bring together all these tribes so that if I am a Munyankore, I identify myself as a Munyankore but a Ugandan. The efforts ideally should be to cause that. That's the campaign ideally we should be running. And so even if I were a leader and deep inside understand that I am a Munyankore, but it shouldn't reflect. Because the question then should be, what would be the effect of if I mentioned that? That when mother cow is chewing, the young ones are watching the movement of its jaws. But what you say as a leader has an effect on an emerging leader like me, like the rest of us that are on the panel today. That we have people in leadership, and ideally we should be looking up to them and copying that they are doing. But when you divert as a leader in that capacity and in that position, and this is the best you can do, this is the best you can say, what ideally I should feel is bad for me to say is going to be watered down. I'll feel like it is okay to make any statement regardless of how sentimental it can be. You see the effect. The Banyankore have a proverb that that when you have a child at the back and you are stealing, that same child is watching. The communication, the point I am making is leaders have a duty to understand that they are not only leading, but setting an example. And so, the affairs, the future of this country is dependent on the decisions, on the statements that the leaders in power make today. Because that has a bearing in the long term. Zeroing down to the aspect of the tribal statements. I am a Munyankore. The Western region is quite broad. But right now, from the statements that have been made, every other person that has been initially identified as a Munyankore is trying to see how they run away from potential danger. Because we all understand that this has an effect on every person who identifies as a Westerner. It is planting information in those that are not Western that we hold the power, that we are the decision makers, that if it is taking a share of the national cake, we hold 90% of that percentage. And times change, positions change, power changes. So every other person that is identified as a Munyankore is worried that what would happen if a person outside that bracket, we wake up today and they hold office of decision making. You've seen people, Kwesiga, saying that we are not Banyankore. Banyankore are Bahima. You've seen Batoro making statements that we are not Banyankore. Even amongst us, the Bahima, we've also gone deep to say, I am a Muhima, they are also Bahima, but I am not of their clan. And favor is to their clan. You can see how everyone is running away from that danger. And a toad does not run in daytime for nothing. The fact that people are taking those positions should communicate that there is danger ahead, unless otherwise. Very important to note. You understand, you get the point, Brian. And so these statements are not as lightly as some people want to treat them. For me, I wouldn't do that. Today I had an interaction with a colleague of mine, and we had a similar debate. His statements, his messages are right here. That there are people that are passionate about changing affairs of this country, that if you fronted a rebellion or something, or a struggle or a demonstration, they are very willing to take part in that. But the question is, they are worried of what could happen if a person beyond the geographical identification is president. They worry, they fear. Trust me, so many people, including us that identified as Westerners, are as bitter and are angry as the rest of the people in Uganda, in the north, in the east, and in the central. But we feel the lesser evil theory, that if we have two evils of the NRM government and you have an evil of a probable government under Bobi Wine or another person who has a name that is not anywhere connected to the West, what am I going to suffer? That I would rather suffer under the NRM, where I almost belong by the point of origin, other than being under Bobi Wine. That does not guarantee. I am not making a communication that it is guaranteed that if he comes into power, he will be tribal. But any other person, and by nature, you would want to revenge. It is natural, by the way, irrespective of your level of education, irrespective of the honesty of your feelings, but it is innate. It is innate. It is human tendency to want to. The same way you want to do good to me because I did good is the same way you want me to suffer consequences at a later stage if I wronged you. So people are worried, and so these statements for me, I don't know, are stimulating the feeling of the non-Westerners getting angry about the Westerners, and the Westerners fearing the more of what would happen if one who is not their own holds power today. And so there is a big problem in a country that is struggling and striving to have harmony. You know, by the fact that we are so many tribes, that alone is already a disservice. It affects the running of this country. It affects policy implementation. It affects almost everything. And so all efforts ideally should be made to lessen the identity at a tribal basis, but rather at a national level. And now, if we are striving to do that and you are dragging us behind, in fact, throwing us in the bin if you make that as a top leader in this country. And for me, that's my fear. That's my fear. You know, every other time I tell you guys on this show, I've mentioned this quite often. When I see Thomas submitting, I can tell that this man has lived here. He's a planned child. I have told you people quite often that you people that have lived in these modern settings, the urban settings, are at a disservice. There is a lot in this country that you have not known. In our villages, you cannot cry of poverty even when you are poor at the moment. Because you cry or you want to sound like you are feeling for the country just like any other person, and the first thing a person tells you, you are the people that have everything. You can't cry like us. So you imagine if I feel like he does.
Cry professional. I
am already worried. And so this is what Thomas doesn't know. When you see him speaking clearly, you can tell that he does not have that. Because for this, clearly.
Jake, I would like to, when he finishes, I would like to.
Kindly hold on. The reason I make mention of that is that, one, he is learned and he has ability to discern and to filter. If he were president, I can tell that he knows who to target or who to punish. But he forgets that he's one person.
True.
He's a drop in the ocean. Among so many Baganda that are not learned as you are, among so many people that are not rational and objective as you are. And the country will not only run on your decision, but it will even run on the basis of the social harmony, of how villages live far away from where you stay, far away from the decisions you make. And remember, the country does not run just from top to bottom, but also bottom to top. If you are trying to force harmony and unity as a leader, that is the administration, from the top, it should also be felt from the bottom. But if the ground ekintu kirala, if it's a different thing on ground, and that's the mindset that Western ina buli kimu, and that is a statement made by a person who doesn't even ever see you speak as a president, then what exactly your efforts are going to waste, because they are only received by me who watches the news or who understands you at a personal basis. And that does not build a country. What builds a country is this that is being said. It is what builds it, it is what destroys it. And so there is a big problem. We must agree. Well, it is my personal opinion, these are my views, and I am responsible. But rationally, you should be able to understand that we have a problem, irrespective of who you are and who you identify as, for as long as you are Ugandan.
Thomas, you had a quick response, then we can go for a break. I'll come
Yeah. Yes, I have grown up here. But I have tried. Funny enough, I don't have, apart from my family members, I don't think I have as many friends from Uganda as I have from other regions of the country. Most of my friends, my closest friends, one person that I would risk my life for is Emmanuel. And he called me yesterday, he checked on me, and he was calling me to ask me a few things. But one time, he made a statement. I was talking about something on my status, and then he told me that not all of us from the West are happy with the first family. And he said, I know who to, if I was president, I know who to punish. I cannot punish the West. I've been speaking about this on this show from time to time. The problem is the first family. I know, because a friend of mine was talking to me, he's from Chegegwa. He told me people in Chegegwa vote because of salt of 500 shillings, a t-shirt, and they vote. And one person is in charge of the whole county. People are very, 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 and especially people from the West, it is really, really bad. That's why most people run to the central because it is the most busy area. So I understand. Then I've been on the show and he has been speaking, and I did a reflection, and I realized that we are, for one who has been talking about hope, I realized that there is no hope for Uganda if the first family is still in power. Personally, I would not, as he said, I have to take into consideration if another person from another tribe takes over power, revenge is bound to happen one way or the other. That's why for me personally, one would say that, you're campaigning for the person, but for me I've always told people, the person that would lead us to where we want after Museveni immediately would be General Muntu.
Yes.
Because I believe the fact that he's from the West and people respect him, even army people, he has served. We have seen comments where people say civilian, and now, again, the same person we're talking about today made the statement where civilians cannot. And I know it trickles down to some few, I'm not going to say all, but I know they are there. We can't rule out the fact that some generals also think like that a civilian cannot rule. So we need a person who understands that particular army, how the army works, and he manages to achieve separation of power. So that if a civilian is to come in, he has made distinctions of how the country should be Personally, I don't think that I don't believe in the judicial system. I asked you earlier today, people that are studying to be lawyers, do you see progress, like professional progress as a lawyer in Uganda? Do you see it? Because when you decide to become, when you choose a profession, you see yourself growing. do you people see yourself growing as lawyers? Do you see, is there a room for growth as lawyers in Uganda, practicing law the way it's supposed to be?
Let's hold on that thought. I know right now the show has somewhat also become emotional at the same time. So let's just
He nearly cried.
I am.
I know. It's
The man has gone in silent mode.
personally, I have very reserved comments for what is going on, but we all pray for a better Uganda, and we make the
Our prayers
contribution
enough.
we make. But anyway, we shall come back from the break, and Olai, I know you have a burning issue. I'll start with you when we come back. Just stick with us. See you in a bit.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that break. Just before we went into the break, we had a very emotional and yet a heated conversation. And Ellen, you had something you are burning to say. So let's just start with you as we progress with the conversation.
Thank you so much, Drake. I would like to bring back a sort of argument that he had raised in regards to how right now, if another person from a different tribe came into leadership, because of the kind of image the people in power have portrayed to us, just like the CDF, yeah? So I would say it's going to fall back. There's no point in which I believe that mind of a revengeful mind is going to come in place. I feel it will totally depend on the person we are going to put into power. It's totally going to depend on how intentional the person we're going to have in power is going to stand. But I would totally disagree with the mind that we should, as Ugandans, as future leaders, I would disagree with the mind that even us who are here who come to an understanding that the kind of perspective that the CDF has come up with especially the social aspect, if you're going to stand on that, then it's going to affect the kind of leadership you're going to have. Yes, we don't run away from the fact that, first, I would still agree that with him, that the aspect that he comes with Nyankore and all it's destroying the kind of unity as a country that we have strived to build. Now, as a country, we have looked at a place, like he said, we have over 60 tribes. Now, this is a tribe like the Banyankore that they come up and speak about. It's a very small, it's not is it the largest? I don't think it's the largest. I think the Baganda are the largest, right? So if we're going to have a community being put in that kind of image, so we're destroying the unity. Now, when we're speaking of unity, we are going to have a point where people are going to be rebellious towards the development of the country. Now, let me bring it more into perspective. Let me say, if in government that are pushing towards a certain kind of development in that particular region, we are going to have a lot of resistance. These are things I'm trying to put in place. Yes, someone may not have noticed, but as a country, if you do not fight against the ideology, it's this kind of ideology, the tribalistic ideology, that is going to affect the social dynamics of the country. It's going to affect how the different leaders in position are going to influence the budgeting, the drafting, in that because we all have a mind of the Banyankore being the people who are not know anybody, imparting the ideology of the kind of a tribalistic ideology. So if it comes to decision making, and let me say it's a genuine reason as to why the particular place in Ankore needs to be developed, people are going to resist that development. Why? Because of this kind of the dark humor they're putting in place. So as a country, we're going to lose a point of a sense of development in a point of we are developing as a whole, but rather we're going to develop in more of a very
Fragmented.
thank you, a very fragmented dynamic. So I believe that as such personalities, if we continue to condone such characters, there will be no law for us to protect as a country, and eventually our social aspect, because the social aspect carries a very big impact on a nation. Yeah.
All right.
So yes, thank you.
Brian, something I'm really interested in is we have a very decorated and respected People's Defense Forces in the UPDF. And right now, what we are seeing, or the image that is being portrayed in the UPDF, which is, of course, in primary school they told us, or they taught us, that the army protects the country. The police keep law and order. And what are we seeing? In protecting the country, you're torturing civilians, you're abducting civilians. And the topmost office has portrayed that they're actually doing that. With the mandate and prerequisite of protecting the country, you have resorted to torturing the people that your mandate is to protect. The trust people now have in the army, the trust people have in people in the uniform is no more. And I doubt it can be rebuilt anytime soon, because we have seen torture, we have seen killings on the streets of Kampala, we have seen beating, we have recently Kyambogo University, we saw students going against the idea that they wanted some of their students, actually yeah, it was the issue of surcharges, and we saw what the men in uniform were doing to students, unarmed students who were peacefully expressing their freedom of expression. The trust in the men in uniform has gone down. And the person who heads that a particular unit plays a significant role. And his significant role is now being played in watering down all the efforts that the People's Army is supposed to do. And I want you to speak about that.
Thank you. You've put me to the deepest of the corner. I think we need to start with the basics, that whether you're in the army or not, you're still bound to the Constitution. Because, I mean, our chapter 1 provides for supremacy of the Constitution, but it also provides for sovereignty of the people. Now, sorry about what happened at Kyambogo. I think what happened at Kyambogo was very unfortunate, having even a guild president arrested. That's quite a milestone in showing that youth politics is actually nothing in this country. It's just a show of the camera. I think it's to that very venue, it's very unfortunate. But then also secondly, having a person who is, and Emmanuel had already talked about this, my colleagues have talked about this, when you head, because you see the Chief of Defense Forces is the second in command after the Commander-in-Chief. When you are the CDF of any army and you come out and make such a statement, you should be held liable as per you. Yeah, and that's why you see different armies have court-martial systems. Now, I mean, if it was any other regular, we've seen military officers being brought in for check, disciplinary hearings because of political affiliations. And we've evidenced one of the highly respected generals in this country, General David Sejusa, taking flee because of what was happening. I mean, because they feared that sort of disciplinary hearing. But then comes in a person who is, first of all, a son to the president. Second is a general. Thirdly is now the CDF makes such a comment. And up to now, we have no communication from the court-martial. Yes, from the president himself, who is supposed to take him in, or even the court-martial calling in for him. It then puts us to the point of view that he said, not everyone is somebody. Yes, so some people can do something and then get away with it. But then comes in the question of trust. Will then people trust the forces anymore? We, as a country, we've just come back from a brief scenario that wasn't that good, of having journalists being beaten during the Narukola by-election. Yes, you had the military coming in. I mean, this is a full force. Yes, and later on, funnily, NRM did not pass through. Now, people already are trying to heal from that small period and then you come in the period of having Eddie Mutwe being brought in, and all these tweets are coming in.
Dr. Kizza Besigye is still in,
yes,
among other reasons.
And I mean, among others, and just at the end of this year, we are going to begin the general campaigns because next year we need to vote for a new president. What then is going to happen next? We saw a rampant rise of drones in the previously finished general elections, rampant usage of drones, and people clearly stated that this was by SFC and are related. Then comes in the question of JAT. Then comes in the Nalukola scandal that happened. We are just from one dining to another dining by the same operations, by security, because generally that is security, whether it's police, whether it's intelligence, whether it's the army, that is security. One, you're losing trust, and at the beginning he made it very clear, we learn nothing. The mistake I think we're doing as a country, and as I think our top military chiefs, is the belief that the military will sustain you in power for long. Everything has, even a rubber band, has a limit to its elasticity. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi had a very good army. He went down. Saddam Hussein had a very good army. He went down. Kabila, just here, a neighboring country, Kabila went down. Yeah. So when you fail to learn that the military cannot sustain you for long, I think right now even the question should have been way beyond that. We had during the breakouts, I said it's because it's public information. The former CDF, General Wilson Mbadi, when he was questioned as to why the current CDF did not come, he clearly asked, "Why do you want to put me in trouble? I mean, is that a place where I want our country to be?" We saw again the CDF emeritus, General David Mohozi, came out and said, and made it clearly known that if you are an armed officer, you don't need to hide your face. The current CDF said, no. I mean, if you're in the special forces, you ought to hide. But then people are losing trust. Because if you're in the army, then do what the army ought to do. If you go to Tanzania, I mean, it's very rare to see the armed forces there. It's because there is a system that has been built. Let police do its role to keep law and order. Let the military do its role to defend the country.
But right now, those lines are blurred because we see the army doing what the police is supposed to do.
Yes, then I again, and that's why I keep moving on to the Constitution. You have not only kidnapped the Constitution, but you have rampantly raped it to the extent that it has no more virginity and blood to lose out. You get? Because when you go to chapter 2 of the Constitution, when you go to chapter 2, chapter 4, you have a whole article that talks about a right from discrimination. The torture that Eddie Mutwe is passing through currently right now is because he affiliated with a certain opposition political party. If he was in NRM, this wouldn't have happened. But should he be discriminated because of his choice? No. I mean, that's why we have a freedom of speech. That's why we have a freedom of assembly, of affiliation. So we would not be having this discussion from then. Why do we want to continue raping something that was already raped? You cannot have two wrongs and justify them. Let the military do its role. The role of the military, everyone knows, is to defend the country, the territorial jurisdiction. Let police do its role in keeping law and order. Let the politicians do their role. Let the technocrats come in and do their role. Let the civic space come in and do its role. When you fail to get separation of powers, then no one is going to work. Because if we go to the judiciary and the case is political, the judicial officers who have made it very clear, I don't want to be part of this case because I may not get promoted. Those that have tried have stayed at the same level for over 15 years. They are judicial officers. We've seen Tebachu Kangako. They have been there stagnant. The guy was a chief magistrate when you entered S1, now finishing law school, he's a chief magistrate. Yeah. They are there because they are fearing. Because comes in the political, do you want to put your family on the line? No. So a guy will tell you, no, I will not. It's the same thing here. If someone was picked this side, why are you presenting them in massacre? Either this person is your judge, or you just don't respect the basic laws. Yeah, so no one wants to. Rest in peace to the former IGP, Omara. These are the same issues he faced. you're having a politician who had a lot of money, flew out and went to get treatment for cancer, got treated, came here, constructed the church. You have a tourist who came, got an issue, and realized that where he was going to die successfully. He didn't die, and he constructed a hospital, at least a facility with some words. At what point then do we have to dissect these things? Let politicians do a very good work, because if we had respect, I usually want to refer to Rwanda and Kenya, and people say they are not good examples, but I think to Uganda, those are very good examples.
Perfect examples.
Rwanda came from a shithole of a genocide. A shithole of a genocide. If you go to Rwanda, you cannot compare it with Uganda. Two different things. If President Paul Kagame stands up and says we are taking ABC and it's going to be implemented, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, when coming into office, made a 7-point program, and amongst it had the issue of corruption. We are in 2025. Corruption in the NRA/NRM government has not only gone by twice or thrice, we are in like 5 times the threshold. He set up the anti-corruption unit. We have the State House anti-corruption unit. We have a whole department in judiciary.
IGG.
Yes, we have the anti-corruption court. We have the IGG. When IG came out to establish the lifestyle audit, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni publicly said, please do not go that way. Because those people who you're accusing allegedly invest the money back in the country, but do they? So what more measures do you want to say? He said it, we are just lazy. Because in Kenya, when things went, and I said this in a talk show here, I think last year, I think it was last year when Kenya underwent the protests. People had to come out and protest because, one, if you said ABC and then why are you doing X, Y, Z? And not every time that peace is going to be an option. Sometimes violence triggers to that extent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas,
Yes.
political repression. We are gearing towards that political season. The youth structures and the youth elections are already around the corner in August. But the bigger picture is on the road to 2026. We saw towards 2021 a couple of abductions. We saw what happened in November 2020, the killings that happened in the streets of Kampala, the abductions that also happened, the torture of young Ugandans who are just politically active at that point. And after the election, they have been demanding for some individuals who have never been gotten back up to today. Their whereabouts are not known. And here we are, gearing up for another election, 2026. You're already seeing what, should I say, precursor to...
An invitation to treat.
Just a precursor to what could be. And imagine if a head of security of an opposition party can be abducted, then what about that nobody who could possibly just have maybe made a tweet or made a comment somewhere, and you're not known? You whisked away, your family members will complain, right? Talk about missing persons, police, court, and nothing happens. And that is where we're headed. But my interest is the political repression that we're moving, like this particular topic puts us to. The abductions that is happening, the torture that is happening. How does this affect the political terrain come 2026?
Dangerous. It's going to be too bad. I feel like we might lose more, because last time when COVID, but you saw what happened. Now imagine where Bobi Wine is allowed to move through the country. What is going to happen? How many people are they going to keep on abducting on all those rallies?
And killing.
People are going to disappear in huge numbers. I don't know if they're even building more prisons, because you will be there for like 3 years, you never meet.
Is a word provided from the Constitution, and the definition is clearly there. Maybe you just say detention centers.
But we have people that are there and they don't.
They don't know.
Why are we talking about the Constitution of Uganda in the first place? When has it ever been respected? So now I'm now moving away from that. I have eliminated it in my vocabulary completely. We have people who are abducted, they're taken to the so-called centers, these ones, and then they don't see a judge for years, but they are held for years. And yet, how long? How long is it supposed to be before you are
48
taken?
hours.
48 hours.
8 hours.
Those are
2
2
days,
days.
2 days practically.
Then someone spends in prison,
Five
in the
years.
center
2 years.
for 5 years, 3 years. Then what are we doing? One, of late I've been thinking, a bit, it has been a little bit quiet. Ever since he put out that picture, it has been quiet. And I had stepped out of Uganda and I had looked at Africa as a whole. And I realized that what they were saying about the neo-colonial era, it is a real thing. I always thought that, oh no, these guys are just like the black, the presidents are just like working on their own, they are greedy. But then when I have, tried to learn more about it, I realized that there is a bigger monster that we should be fighting instead of wasting time on petty things. Look at that young gentleman in Burkina Faso, what he's doing, and look at how they're treating him. They chased him out of, they're planning on chasing him out of ECOWAS. He's going to build a new regional bloc. And look at the things he's doing. He's in his 30s, 40s.
39.
And then you look at what they did to Gaddafi. I think if, first of all, elections are very expensive. They're monetary. And I think this is because of the white person. That is why we are here. Because after an election, people are speaking about what is going to happen in the next election. The 5 years in between is more of preparing for you to stay in power. Then we lose the administration. People do not focus on administration within those 5 years, which I believe I wish I was there back then. Then I would have proposed something like, if we take over power, we don't adopt the white system of administration. Because before the whites, we had a system of administration that we used and we managed to manage ourselves properly. If we had built an African way of administration, like a hierarchy, that we understood ourselves, then maybe we would be a little bit too far.
Thomas, I like the hope. I like the ideal thinking. But the reality is, building that African democratic philosophy that you're trying to push forward seems to somewhat be impossible. Let's deal with the elephant in the room. We are already experiencing the so-called democracy in our own terms in this country. And the reality is, people will maybe continuously get abducted, continuously get tortured, God forbid, continuously keep on facing these gross human rights violations. And nothing is to be done. So what can we do with what we are experiencing in the present to make it better? Because we can think of an African democratic philosophy, but we need to deal with our present. And that is the present. Maybe you can offer us solutions, and we can introduce the end of the show.
All right. I had, but basically, we cannot blame. The person we are supposed to blame is the president, because he's the one who has led us here to this point. We see how he has positioned his family and everything. And it's a pity that a person that came with the hopes of liberating us is. But then, what you're talking about, the liberation from this, goes back to us as individuals. I feel like us youth, the reason as to why I brought up the Burkina Faso, I was going to relate it to us. To me, I've realized that we are a joke. We know what is going on. We either decide to join them, as we talked about, many have the flag, the NRM flag. They join the party, maybe to get a few things here and there, make ends meet. And we forget what we owe the country itself and others, because it is myself, I and my family, those close members, the rest of the world, because we have seen, as we talked about earlier, even people from the West are not benefiting from the current regime. It is only those that are close to power that benefit as much. And for me, I would not even, we need to actually, we as individuals, me, you, we need to stand up for this. We need a one uniform movement where we decide, come what may. I know, as I told you, as a leader, when you decide to step into that uncomfortable zone, you should expect one thing, the ultimate sacrifice. You have given up yourself. You should give death the benefit of a doubt. The death benefit, they call it the death benefit. You don't know what will happen after death, but you be hopeful that after death, there is something better. So you're no longer afraid of death. You see, judges are scared of being imprisoned, tortured, killed. Yeah. That is why the system is broken. Ugandans, we are cowards.
Okay. Your concluding remarks.
My concluding remarks. We as the youth, we are, me inclusive, we are a joke. We need to...
That's a very huge statement.
Yes, yes.
But proceed.
A young man, a Burkina Faso youth, is fighting superpowers. And he's ready, come what may, rain or sunshine. Then it is the same situation. We are nobodies. We are trying to fight the elephant in the room. That is the first family. We are not fighting the West. We are not fighting the Banjankore. We are fighting, that is where the effort should be. Drive them out. Tell me, why would a person vote for the current president given all these things that have happened now? Why would he have more than 50%?
Do you remember the slogan 2021?
Securing your tomorrow.
Securing your future.
Your future.
I saw even the one of my friends, like I said, he came earlier and told me this times he has seen the slogan is settle for the best, settle for best.
Something like that.
All right.
But really, we need to meet up as youth. We need to meet up and sit down. All those people that feel, I know we tend to have those circles. We need to sit down and look for a way forward, because that is the same thing those people in Makerere back then used to do. Sit down as youth and move. I don't know, the youth back then were more than we are. And I know I am attacking me, myself, and my colleagues, but it's the truth. We cannot, when you're talking about, you don't have to filter. We need to attack it the way it is and move forward.
All right. Brian, concluding remarks and with forward.
Thank you so much. I kindly request fellow Ugandans to vote with regards to capacity, with regards to growing trends. At least let's take an example from Rwanda and Kenya to begin with in Africa. So I kindly request fellow Ugandans to, when voting, not look at the political party affiliation, but rather vote competency. Because when you vote someone regarding a political party without reasoning, you then take us miles behind. But when you vote someone, regardless of political party, and you vote them as per competence, you then bring about a new generation of legislators. Yeah. And I think any sound Ugandan can honestly say that among the best parliaments we had in Uganda is the 6th, 7th, and 8th. We want to go back to that regime of legislators we had, cream de la cream legislators. So, but that cannot come when we vote because of political party rather than competence. Secondly, I call upon fellow Ugandans to desist from emotional-based submissions and thinkings, because then it can trigger a civil unrest, which I think as a country we are not yet prepared for. Reason is we have a very bad healthcare system, we have a very bad education system, We have a very bad infrastructure system. We've recently seen the son of Sudiri Parelia die, and then Ministry of Works is now waking up to make all these submissions. How about the other people that died before? Aren't they Ugandans? You get? But that is only a drop in the ocean. So if we have a civil unrest right now, we are going to take back the no development we have is going to be taken back miles behind. So I kindly request that as Ugandans we be awake. But then thirdly, I kindly request security forces to not take sides in these upcoming elections and do their role, because honestly speaking, beating up of civilians who are practicing their constitutional right to maybe vote, to maybe affiliate, to maybe assemble, is something we do not want as Uganda. For the many years we've been around, Uganda has been there far more than our ages. Uganda is still there, and Uganda will always stay even when we leave. But then lastly, I want to thank Center for Constitutional Governance for always calling upon the youth to come and share. You see, we take these things for granted, but something that has been put on media, on record, is not something that can ever be deleted. Thank you.
Thank you. Very happy to have you, and thanks. Olai, concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, Drake. My concluding remarks would basically be that we need to stop condoning such character, because it's going to spark something we're not ready for. We have seen this in history. We have seen this several times. Every time such characters are led to continue moving, we have heard of things like long-term causes and then immediate causes. So these may actually turn out to be long-term causes, no? So we do not want to lose ourselves, like he said. We're not ready for any kind of civil instability in this country. So we need to put ourselves together. And to all the youth, secondly, to all the youth, is that we need to keep pushing. Let's keep trying our level best, because we cannot deny the fact that it feels scary. It's dangerous, like treading the path of seeking clarity, treading the path of being honest and sincere in this country seems very scary. It seems like a drone is soon coming by. Like, it seems very scary. So I would still say let's keep pushing, because at the end of the day, we don't want this to keep on moving. We don't want to keep living in fear. And finally, I would like to appreciate the Center for Constitutional for giving us the opportunity to be here to express our views. We are very grateful, and I'm very humbled to be here.
Thank you. Definitely. Emma, your concluding remarks and way forward.
Thank you, and I associate myself to the submissions of the three speakers, but with Aruho's, I receive it with the necessary modifications thereof. He says that people should not debate with emotion, and that I agree, but with modification. That if you as a leader, you are not being sensitive to statements you make to your people, how then do you expect them to bury their emotions if you've actually been the cause? That is sorted. In the play, Betraying the City by Francis Mbuga, Moses makes a statement, and he says that it was better while we waited, that now we have nothing to look forward to, that we've killed our past and are busy killing our future. And for me, my worry and emphasis is on the word future. There is a word, intergenerational equity, that it is important that as a generation that lives, as people that still breathe today, should be considerate of the generations to come after us. And so with this kind of administration, with the kind of leadership which, with due respect in my opinion, is a mere shambolic ensemble of mediocrity, we are not laying a basis for the generations to come. And should we fail to, then history is going to judge us. The point then is, how will it judge us? And that is already answered. But Binwell Senyanga writes a book, A Kawere of Hope. A Kawere of Hope. And so I understand that the situation at hand seems to erode our hope, and that is very true. But I'm optimistic that other factors constant, ceteris paribus, there is a Kawere of hope. a little glimmer of hope, and that with that things could be better. But that is not guaranteed. That is not obvious. It is only possible if the few that are sensitive, if the few that are open to reality, if the few that are pro-people, if the few that are neutral, if the few that are objective do something about that. Failure of which we are headed for disaster and complete destruction. But God forbid, I hope that doesn't happen. With that, I thank you so much, Drake, for having me and the rest of the panelists, and kudos to Center for Constitutional Governance for creating a voice for Ugandans, but most importantly, us the youth, and to the crew that is always behind the cameras as we make our deliberations. Thank you so much, and to the viewers for always watching and giving in your opinions, because we come here not just to teach, but to learn, and so I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas, Brian, Alan, and Emmanuel, for always sparing time and coming through for these wonderful discussions. We truly appreciate. And to you, our dear esteemed viewers, for always watching, thank you very much. And to Center for Constitutional Governance for making this possible. Thank you. Lastly, to the production crew for always, yes, being there behind the camera to ensure that the show is well received and right on time. Otherwise, my name is Drake Onen. See you next week, same time, same place.